Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and this is the show where we talk to the people behind the productivity. This week I'm excited to share with you a conversation I had with Brian Falchuk, where we talk about his unique story, which I know you're going to enjoy is probably not the right word, but I know you'll get a lot out of it. If you've ever felt like you're stuck or you have things just holding you back and you know you need to move forward with an entirely new mindset, his story is all about that. We talk about having mindfulness, about what motivation really is, as well as having persistence moving forward. Well, this week it is my privilege to welcome Brian Falchuk to the show. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
So you have a fascinating story, and honestly, I just need to ask you right up front, would you mind sharing some of that story of where you've been and kind of the transformation that you've gone through? Set the context for us. Paint us a picture.
Yeah. So there's really two pivotal, not moments because they were longer than that, but two pivotal points in my life that really define a lot of who I am or who I have been and what I've faced. So the first is growing up like, half the country. I was a child of a divorced family. I was the marriage saver baby and didn't work. So my parents wouldn't admit that, but you do the math, like it's pretty obvious I was the attempt and it just didn't play out that way. So I was like a 4 or 5 year old. My parents' marriage started to come apart. I was the youngest of four. And, little kids have one very clear need, and that's to be taken care of. They need to feel safe and secure and cared for. And in divorce, a lot of times that feeling isn't there because people are moving out, money becomes more of an issue or a major issue. There's a lot of arguing, there's all kinds of things that would make a little kid feel unsafe or uncared for. And of course, I was one of four, so my parents' time was already divided quite heavily. And then you add in everything going on with the divorce, and it's just like, there's no time for the kids, and being as young as I was still pretty needy. So I wasn't feeling safe and secure. My needs weren't being met. And so I turned to food because that was always there. It always felt good. It wasn't arguing. It wasn't moving out, and just being that young, like obviously didn't really understand my feelings or how to work through them. So I just ate. And, this wasn't a slowly but surely I gained weight kind of thing. It was like, you look at a picture of me from age like 4.5 to one of like age 6. And I was like, I went from being this skinny, smiley little kid to clearly not happy and clearly obese. So it was pretty fast. And I just kept gaining weight all through my childhood into my teen years. I stopped weighing myself when I was about just shy of 250 because I couldn't face it anymore. So I probably got somewhere in the 260 to 280 range. I really don't know. I just know my pants kept getting bigger. And I was really lucky to get connected with a guy in my high school who ran our physical education program. Like PE is the blow-off class for a lot of kids. He took it really seriously, and he used it as a way to introduce kids to wellness and health and get them to own it for themselves. So you didn't have to go run laps because he said so. He's like, let's look at all these different possible things you can do. Let's figure out which ones you enjoy and then create a program around that. So you really he was educating you, and then you had ownership of the process. He's just an incredible person. And so with his help, I changed my relationship to exercise, and I was able to lose weight, and diet too. And I was able to lose weight. The problem is I never dealt with the reasons why I gained weight in the first place. So I wasn't obese because I was eating too much. I was eating too much because of the underlying emotional depression kind of issues.
Right.
And so, he helped me with the eating and the movement, but we weren't addressing the whole reason behind it. And I had a motivation at the time, but it was a very outward facing motivation. I didn't want to be the fat kid anymore. I didn't want to be judged like that anymore. Teenager, you start being interested in girls, and no one would give me the time of day. I was the fat kid. So, it's so funny for me. I just had a high school reunion a few months ago, and it always amazes me how many people are like, "Oh, wow, you look great." And it's like, I actually was super fit senior year in high school. You just don't remember me that way. In everyone's head, even though they had a whole year with me where I had gotten down to about the weight I am right now. And I was really active and all that. I'm framed in their mind as being obese. So when they picture me, they still picture me from when I was, seriously overweight. I think that's so telling about this perception, and I didn't want to be perceived that way. And that's great. But then I went to college and nobody knew me. I was in a totally new, there's one person from my high school there. So no one knew me as a fat kid. And so that whole reason for losing weight was gone. And then it was a slowly but surely kind of story. And, by my mid 20s, I had put on some weight. I never looked obese again. I just looked American. Like no one would have looked at me and been like, "Oh, that's the fat guy." It's like, yeah, we're all a little soft and what. Like, I just looked like everybody else, but I was overweight. I wasn't healthy, and most importantly, all the reasons why I was obese in the first place were still there. I was still depressed. I still had anxiety. I still felt insecure about my well-being from a financial and a stability standpoint, and that that stuck with me through to my marriage. So this is where the second pivotal point comes in. I got married. My wife and I had a few years together before our first child came along. And then in 2011, he was about 2.5 that summer. And my wife has a chronic illness, which we didn't know at the time, but it reared its head then. And it reared its head really hard. And so it was the summer of 2011. She was, on all accounts, on her deathbed. So she was wasting away in a ton of pain. No one could figure out what was going on. The doctors were really just blowing it off and being like, you're doing this to yourself. Are you sure you're not just depressed? You're like, we can't find anything wrong with you. And so really not just unhelpful, but shaming her and shaming us as a family for, this is our fault and there's actually no problem. It's like, look, this young mother is now bedridden. She's literally she's wasted away to nothing. And her primary care doctor called me right before going on vacation. He's like, yeah, I'm going away for 6 weeks. Let's check in when I'm back. And I was like, she's losing 2 pounds a day. She's about 100 pounds at this point, literally. Do the math. She will not be here when you're back. I said that to him word for word. And his response was, oh, well, then take her to the ER if you need to.
Oh, geez.
Yes, we will do that, but that's not good enough. And that was June 30th, 2011. That hit me like a ton of bricks because I got off the phone with him. I walked into our bedroom and my son was just looking at his mother. And so I'm looking at her in bed. I'm looking at him, looking at her, and I'm like, what on earth is going on with the situation, with my life, with all of this?
How old was he at the time?
He was 2.5.
Oh, wow.
I was 30. I can't do math right now. 30 something.
Okay.
Oh, 2000. I was 30. I was almost 33.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. That I should. That's my next goal is to be able to do math on the fly. I'll tackle that one. Yeah. It was just and I was miserable. Like my job situation wasn't great. I was looking at losing my wife, which if I was like 80. Or 90, sure. That happens. Spouses lose their spouses late in life. That's something you're at some point you're going to face. You don't expect it when you're in your early 30s with your first kid and just starting your life together. So this is, beyond the realm of anything I had ever contemplated before. And I just had this profound sense of failing my family and failing myself, that I wasn't living, well, the way I wanted to, but you could even just stop at the word living. I wasn't living. I was miserable and everything was falling apart. And this whirlwind of trying to scramble and fix things wasn't working anymore. And that was this moment of clarity where I figured out, what my motivation was is, first and foremost is I need to be there for this little boy because he's watching his mother die and he's watching his father die just at a slower rate. And that is completely unacceptable. He needs me more than ever because it could just be the two of us. So that, if for no other reason than for him, this has to change, but it needs to change for me too. And I woke up the next morning, literally a changed man. And it's not to say everything was perfect, but for the first time ever, I had true purpose. I had true direction. I knew a reason why I needed to do things to transform. And that slowly but surely gaining weight, I'd gotten up to 222. I should be around 180. I had been working out, but it was like I get on the elliptical, I'd cover the screen with a magazine, and 30 minutes later, the thing's beeping, and maybe I was slightly sweaty, but I hadn't really done anything. But I was like, yeah, I worked out. That was different. So first thing I did was I got up, went to work out, and I put on an interval program. And when those intervals hit, I didn't cover the screen so I could see them coming. When those intervals hit, man, I busted it. I worked really hard. And at the end of that half hour, I was drenched, first of all. And second of all, I was exhausted, but I felt amazing. And that's something I hadn't felt before. And I was like, this is different. And I can do something about, like, I knew what my weight was. I'd weighed myself before working out. I was like, that's not where it should be. So it's July 1st. By the end of the year, I want to get to 185. So I was like, that's, roughly where I should be, give or take a few pounds. It's a good, stable place for me. And that's, it's enough time to do it, but not so much time that I don't have to try. Like it's about 40 pounds I had to lose. So that's a legitimate amount of weight. It wasn't, I had to lose about 100 pounds the first time around. It's not at that scale, but it's not like 5 pounds. I don't know how you lose 5 pounds. It's such a small amount. It's kind of irrelevant. Like, what actions do you take every day for your wellness to lose 5 pounds? It's like, don't eat for a day, you'll lose 6 pounds, and then you're done. And then what do you do? So I was like, I want to do this by the end of the year, and I'm unhappy in my work situation. I need to start to figure that out. And, I've got this depression. I've got stuff from my childhood, from, my parents' marriage unraveling, from a number of things. I need to start to deal with that. And I've had all these excuses of why I can't talk to someone because I don't have time. And I can't do that anymore because I don't have time to not do it. So those were 3 main things that I was like, these are major problems in my life that I need to fix. And so I started in that day. And I should say pretty clearly, my wife is still alive. So we all changed.
I was going to say, so that
sometimes I forget to mention that. And it's
yeah. I wanted to kind of clarify and close that part of the story there, and get a I guess happy ending. On that.
It is.
So everything turned out okay. Like, obviously she's, you guys are, I would say you probably are in the description of, say, thriving now.
Yeah, I mean, so she still has her illness. It's something, we'll deal with for the rest of our lives, but to be able to say that even is very positive, and we've grown tremendously, and she's not, like, death is not knocking on the door anymore. It's there in the way that it was, before any of this. Like, at some point in our lives, they end. But it's not facing us right now, and we're living our lives. We both transformed tremendously. Like, as cheesy as it sounds, there are silver linings on clouds. And sometimes those clouds are pitch black, but we found them. So she's, through her illness, she's learned a ton and overcome a lot of it and gotten to a place where it's not threatening her life. And so people who watch that, who are also suffering, have turned to her for help. And so she's just finishing up a degree as a certified functional medicine coach. So she's, she loves doing that because, like, it's saving lives and it's making lives materially better. I've written a book. I'm writing for a major magazine. I've totally changed my career situation. I'm actually still in the same industry, but I'm thriving now. And I'm helping people as well. So there's so much good that's come from that. So yeah, I think thriving is a fair word, but it's not like we don't face challenges still. Right. You can thrive and be challenged. That's okay. It's called life, Yeah,
totally. What I mean by thriving, and I think what most people would mean, is you're not just getting by anymore.
Yeah.
You're doing more than just, you are actually living, to use your own words from earlier.
Yeah. So. And it's about purpose. And, that's why I wanted to talk with you today, is that's, so much of our lives we do mindlessly. Before we started recording, we were talking about the smartphone. Mm-hmm. I said the black hole, like, you get sucked into it and you wake up, you're like, wait, where did all that time go? It's because you're mindlessly going through things without even knowing why you're doing it. So of course you're not pausing to think, like, does this actually add to what I'm trying to achieve? When you have purpose, when you have direction, the things that you do are on purpose. The things that you do are adding up to trying to get to that place where you want your life to be, or maybe they're part of that place, the journey itself. And so then it's not about having to do, or, just muddling through it or gritting your teeth and getting through the worst of it. Everything you do has a purpose, And that's how you actually achieve. It's not a to-do list, it's an achievement list. Yeah. And that's a very different way to experience your life. And that's like, if I summed it all up, that's the real difference with what I go through now is I'm insanely busy. I've got lots of stresses, but everything I'm doing is towards this purpose. Everything I'm doing is aligned with my motivation. It has a reason. So I love it. Whether I'm tired or not, whether it's hard or not, I love what I'm doing. And that's a totally different situation from before. And that's why it's been sustainable.
Going back to that moment, that kind of pivot or that, that revelation where your wife's on her deathbed and you realize you have to change. It wasn't just about losing the weight. It was, much more than just weight loss that you needed to change. And even the fact that, in other words, share some of where your mind was at that time, because obviously you'd lost more than 100 pounds previously and you had less weight to lose this time. But again, the weight loss was like one component of a bigger revelation to you.
Right. So, I mean, this to me actually ties into a lot of what I experience in my coaching business. So when people are like, what's the main thing people come to you for? And I actually have trouble answering that because it doesn't matter to me. And that can sound like, wait, you're not listening to the people who come to you for help or you don't care. It's not that at all. It's that all of these different things, they're all symptoms of the underlying cause. And it's not enough to change. Like if you're overweight, you're not overweight just because you have too much weight on your body. That's defining it with its own definition. You're overweight because of something else. And chances are there are many other things in your life that if you really stop and think about it, are they where you want them to be? And maybe actually you're fine with your weight, even if you are overweight. That's okay. But there are probably other things in your life that aren't really where they need to be. And so if you fix the one thing that, is why you came to me for help, or the one thing that you're talking to your therapist about, do you honestly think that's the end of the story? No, it's, life is intertwined. It's holistic. So if you're unhappy about one major aspect of your life, to think that that's not bleeding into other things, if you're miserable at work, as much as you may say, like, and when I leave work at work, I'd highly doubt that. You're tired, you've been agitated all day. When you get home, you think that doesn't show on your body. You think you're not, also tired and upset and maybe a little bit more of a hair trigger reaction to people. That's just normal. That's okay. But it does mean that you can't just fix your work situation without also looking at your home situation, because maybe that's been poisoned by work a bit. Or maybe there's something in how you're feeling in general that you've brought into these other situations now. So the first part of my book it's basically a series of chapters where I talk about things I've gone through, things I've experienced that I needed to change, and how I've changed them, and how I use the book's called Do a Day. It's a philosophy I teach, and it's how I use that philosophy in these different situations. And the point is not to draw attention to myself or to say, I've had it so bad. It's, let me share a variety of different situations where, I had something I needed to go after. And, whether that was a challenge or a goal, I had something that needed to be different. And I wanted to go after that. And, you can too. Like, look at all these different, seemingly unrelated situations. And there's 100 more out there. And when I talk to people or coach people or do shows like this, I hear about others as well. It really doesn't matter what you're going through. There's probably a whole smorgasbord of things that you want better in your life. And you can alter all of those things, maybe one at a time, maybe at a couple at a time, but you get your whole life to do it. So just keep picking those things and go after them.
So you mentioned the title of the book, and this title is interesting to me because it doesn't, for me, it sounds like it's a prescription or something, do a day. So let's break this down. Like, what does do a day mean, and, or what is the philosophy there?
Yeah. So there's a couple of building blocks to it that I'll come back to in a moment, but the philosophy itself is essentially about applying mindfulness to your daily action in support of your goals. So let me break that down a little bit. So mindfulness is all about being present in the moment, not being caught up in the yesterday or tomorrow, focusing your attention on right now. And what you do with purpose. We talked about that with, getting caught in your smartphones or social media or whatever. So if you look at at anything that you struggle with in life. You look at, let's say, a tough time at work, or, using the diet example, because it's one a lot of people can relate to. Let's say you've been trying to lose some weight and you've been doing a good job and you're down 20 pounds. That's a real achievement. And then it's Jimmy in accounting's retirement party, and you go to the bar where everyone's at, and you have a beer and 3 nachos, and those weren't on the diet you've been following. And you're like, what did I just do to myself? I ruined everything. And you go home and you're all depressed, and you're like, well, it's over now. And you call up Domino's and you order, 2 large pizzas and a liter of Coke or whatever, and you down the whole thing because, at this point you've ruined everything because you screwed up and it's all over now. And, let's look at this in perspective. Like those 2 nachos and that beer, okay, they weren't on your diet, quote unquote. I'm not a big believer in diets. I use diet as the term of what we eat every day for our whole life, not, the short term, like shake for breakfast, shake for lunch, and a sensible meal at dinner.
Yeah. I always say, with the words, weather and climate, that there's, weather is like, hey, what's it like today? But climate is what it generally is for the most part all the time. And so you're using diet as climate, although everybody, they kind of say fad diet to mean the word weather.
Right. Right.
If people can track with that analogy.
Yeah. So I use a capital or lowercase d in the book. I don't like diets with a lowercase d. I use it when it's a proper noun. It's talking about, the big picture. But, so you did those things that don't fit with your diet. Okay. How many calories do you think there really were in those 2 nachos or that buffalo wing and the beer? Yeah. More than you wish. But in the grand scheme of 20 pounds, it's basically irrelevant. And if you're doing the right things, if you're living your life with purpose and, the difference I talked about with me on the elliptical before and after, if that's how I'm going about it, then the nacho and the beer, pretty irrelevant. And I can get that back really easily. If I weigh a pound more today than I did yesterday, I really don't care because I have all the tools and I live my life in accordance with my general overall health. That tomorrow I may weigh a pound less than I did 2 days ago. It just doesn't matter. I don't start fretting about it. It's like, oh God, my weight's going up. What am I going to do now? So if you have that moment where you get home and you're feeling horrible for how badly you just screwed up when in reality you didn't. What you're doing in that current moment when you pick up the phone to order those other pizzas that you're about to house, you're essentially throwing away today because of a mistake that you made, quote unquote, yesterday, maybe it was an hour ago. So you're letting the past dictate your current choices. And obviously you're making a really bad choice in the right now because of that prior choice. And instead what you should do is look at what you did, understand it, understand why you did it. Maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe that social interaction was really important. Maybe there's other things you're dealing with about being too distant and not feeling a connection with people. And so it was the right call to go to the bar. And it was the right call to partake in things with them. So you're beating yourself up, and maybe there's some positives in it too, but understand why. Don't just beat yourself up and throw away today because of yesterday. And at the same time, don't do it with tomorrow. I always tell people the night before I got my driver's license when I was 16, I didn't sleep at all. It was so I couldn't wait for it. It's not just about negative things. I was so anxious and excited. I couldn't get to sleep. And of course, and I was like a zombie and I passed, but probably shouldn't have been driving at that point. I was pretty sleep deprived. You can throw away today because of your fear of tomorrow or the positive anticipation of it. So, if you've been in an argument with someone and the next time you see them and it's unresolved still, I promise you're going to go into that interaction. If you're not living to a day, if you're not being mindful, you're going to go into that interaction with all this anxiety about are we going to fight again? What are they thinking about me? Oh, this is going to be tough. You have all these negatives there. So you're probably going to interact with them unnaturally and negatively, whether you mean to or not, because you've allowed the right now to be tainted by the possibility of something that may or may not happen. It doesn't mean you're going to fight again. I used to work with a guy who would flip his lid and scream at the top of his lungs and call you every name in the book. If you call him an hour later, everything's good. That's the way he operates. He's super, super passionate. And it's not easy. It's not enjoyable to deal with. But what I came to learn with him really quickly was that's just the way he is. He flips his lid and then it's done. And he genuinely, like, he would call you a friend if someone asked. He'd be supportive of you if people were talking negatively about you, even though he just, berated you, screaming at the top of his lungs. I don't like that interaction, but if I went into everything with him holding a grudge for that past interaction and expecting he's going to flip out at me, it's probably going to happen because I'm going to be, not ideal with him. And I'm probably going to end up provoking that response in him. So do you end up throwing away the possibilities in right now because of this anticipation of something that may or may not happen? And that's do a day is like when you wake up in the morning and you're facing all of the choices you get to make today in support of your goals. It doesn't matter whether you chose correctly or wisely or in support of your goals yesterday or not. And it doesn't matter how many more times you have to do it tomorrow. When I had 100 pounds to lose, it doesn't matter when I lost 3 of those 100 pounds, like, oh my God, I still have 97 more pounds. How am I ever going to do this? And those 3 pounds are really hard. I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life and it's going to be a struggle. That doesn't actually matter right now because I'm not losing 97 pounds right now. And it's that realization is like, hang on, you don't have all the weight of the future on your shoulders right now. And you don't have all of the judgment of the past on you right now either. You just have today. That's all it ever is. It's never yesterday and it's never tomorrow. When you free yourself from that kind of power of the past and the future, you can start achieving because you're finally free to do it.
So it sounds like the mindfulness component is what really separates the philosophy of doing a day or do a day from just what a lot of people say, which is, live for today or, live one day at a time.
Yeah. I think a really big difference with one day at a time, which is fine. But to me, that's like grit your teeth and get through it or weather the storm. And do a day is quite different. Do a day it starts with that verb do. That's really purposeful. So it doesn't matter what you're facing. Wake up, take some actions and do those things in support of your goals. Don't just hunker down and wait for it to pass. You have to do something. And that's why, maybe people interpret it the same way. Maybe they're like, well, I'm not just going to sit here and do nothing and wait till it's over. It's like, well, then don't just say one day at a time. Be purposeful about it. It's much more empowering and proactive. And that's why I really like it is if you want to live your life, you got to do something about that. So I choose to use phrasing and words that is proactive and is action oriented because that's how you get off your keister and get moving.
You've given a little bit of an example or a peek behind how to implement do a day when it comes to, say, those nachos and the beer or the chicken wings. But what about other extreme stressful situations where that it can feel like it derails us and then we double down on it the next day with the pizza? Yeah,
for sure. So this is, I just got in a debate on Twitter with a very famous military trainer. And, for him with the military, he's big on discipline. He said discipline beats motivation any day. And I get it in the military. I do. I understand that, but I don't agree with him overall. And that's the real difference here. This isn't about just every day, remind yourself, like I did it for years. I'm like, today's the day I'm not going to eat all that junk I always eat. And within an hour, I've had like 3 bagels and a donut. It's like, that was my teenage years. And I had the discipline to have that conversation with myself every day and remember, but I had no purpose. I had no direction. So the first thing I talk about after I give all these examples in the book is then I go into the how you do it chapters. And the first one is about motivation. So you must find your true motivation or this isn't going to work. So it's really important to figure out, I ask a number of introspective probing questions. It's not a workbook. I can't tell you what the answer is. You really have to get into your own head and challenge the heck out of what's going on in there to understand what actually makes you tick and what you really care about. So I've got all these questions. The one I sum it up with is, what will you always care about no matter what? What's the one thing that matters more to you than anything else in the world? You have to dig into that to have enough power to get through those tough moments. Because you know what? There are going to be really tough moments. And there are going to be a lot of great highs too. And you're going to have some positive wins that maybe you want to cut back on the pressure a little bit. Cause it's like, I did an hour yesterday. So today I only have to do half an hour. It's like, well, just because you did an hour yesterday doesn't mean you don't have to do something real today, or doesn't mean you shouldn't. So, you have to keep tapped into your motivation to keep driving forward. And for me, discipline is like, grit your way through it is like, just keep doing it because that's what you should do. But should for what reason? What makes it a must have? So it's really understanding your why, your motivation. For me, it was that moment looking at my son and my wife and, finding real purpose. That's what keeps me on track. So when I have my tough moments, that's what forces me to step back and look at why it's tough and what can I do about it and how am I going to get through it and why is it worth going through that difficulty? Or maybe I'm on the wrong path and I need to look at, it's difficult for a good reason and I need to wake up to that. Maybe I'm struggling physically because actually there's something going on with my body and I need to listen to that. And this isn't about, my goal is not to run 5 miles today. My goal is to be in good physical shape so that I'm here for the long term and I'm healthy. So it's not like push yourself through that last mile, even though you just sprained your ankle. Like, what a stupid choice. I actually should say, okay, I just got injured. I need to back off now. But knowing my reason, it's not just a task. And I think that's where discipline works, is at the task level. I'm talking about purpose in life.
Yeah.
I'm talking about trying to achieve, a situation, not just a number that you're going to put in a spreadsheet or record on, like your like Fitbit or something. That's fine. Or a salary level that you're trying to achieve at work. That's all fine, but like I have no interest in being fine.
It sounds like the discipline. I mean, and discipline's good. I still think it's good for things. It's still good to have, a muscle memory there that can kind of help you kick in when you don't feel like it. But that, I think, is the problem there that a lot of people will have with the word motivation, is they think of motivation as a feeling like doing the thing versus what you're saying, which is knowing your true north, your guide, what it is you're really truly in the end getting out of it. Yeah. And that's your magnet pulling you forward.
You know what it is, Eric? It's your reason for doing it, not your feeling. And discipline is valuable. It has its place. I think discipline is a tool you use to get through stuff once, but you still need to know your motivation. Because, there's a whole slew of things I talk about with motivation. It's not just about, what matters to you most. I think there's certain things that need to be off limits, and there's certain things that are better motivations, and there's some characteristics I talk about. But, one of them that's really important is it's got to be internal to you. So it's not, I talked about me being the fat kid. That's about perceptions other people have, or maybe it's perceptions I have of myself and I'm using them as a puppet. I'm like putting it out there on them, but it's really how I'm looking at myself. But that was about not being looked at a certain way. It's about, don't pick beach season or your high school reunion and you want to get in shape for that, or, your ex-girlfriend's wedding and you want her to be like, oh, wow, I screwed up. I should have been let that stuff go. Because as soon as that thing is over, why are you doing it? If you're trying to get a promotion at work and so you really bust your hump and you outperform and you're really nice and you're doing all these things that are speaking to all the feedback you've gotten over the years, and then you get your promotion and then you turn into an ass and you do half the work again. Is that really the situation you want to be in? Why were you going for the promotion? Like, what was it about? Was it just about title? Was it just about pay? Like, you don't even know why you did it, because all the things that it takes to do that promoted job, you've stopped doing. So is that even a fit for you? And this is where, that's what I do as a coach. Actually, I just get really annoying. I just keep questioning everything people are saying. They're like, oh, my motivation is I want to make a lot of money. And so the first thing I say is, why? Yeah, because, then I can have nice things. Okay, well, why do you want nice things? Why is that important to you? And, we'll go back and forth. And eventually it's like you find out they lived in poverty as a kid and they were homeless for a period. And it's not about having nice things. It's about never wanting to be in that position of, that financial dire straits, not wanting their kids to have to go through that. And I'm like, okay, now we're talking about something very different. You sounded materialistic and, striving to just keep up with the Joneses before. But now you're talking about providing a life for you and your family that has opportunity and has stability. Like, these are values now. This isn't like, I want to be CEO so I can buy a Ferrari. Okay, well, what happens when you buy the Ferrari and, eventually, like, you get sick of it? Why are you still killing yourself as a CEO? Like, you have to find the underlying purpose. That's what it's really about with motivation. Well, and that's really empowering.
Yeah. And one of those things, again, one is materialistic, one is noble. So in other words, one is, one's selfish, one's noble. And it can turn on a dime. And honestly, without having that clarity, you end up sometimes, defaulting to the selfish instead of the noble.
Yeah.
Brian, it's been awesome talking with you. Where can people go grab the book and start to dig into this themselves and start to unravel and or even maybe, reach out to you about your coaching stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So I put everything on the Do a Day Book website. So it's doadaybook.com. It's called Do a Day. It's a book, doadaybook.com. Hopefully it's an easy one to remember. I link up to everything there. So I'm very active on social media. I write for Inc. magazine as well. So that's why I'm very active on social media. You have to keep that going.
Right.
But yeah, so my primary Twitter account is probably where I'm most active, and that's Newbody, Newbodi. But you don't have to remember any of that. It's all at doadaybook.com. The book's for sale everywhere. But again, I link to all that. There's a store on Do a Day Book that just links you out to like Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it's print and ebook, and it's on Audible. I really just try to put it out there. But one thing I will say is I didn't write the book to make money. And if you know anything about the economics of publishing a book, that's a good thing because it's pretty hard to make money doing that.
Right.
I wrote the book to help people change their lives because I can't coach everybody, even if I did it 24/7. And I want to get this out there because I've seen it impact people and I've seen it change lives. And that's what's happened since publishing it last March. So I do put a lot of the content behind the book out. It drives my Inc. magazine articles. They're really mostly inspired by the book. So if you find me on Inc., you can start to read more about it. Yes, you can come to me for coaching. I do public speaking as well. And, shows like yours, like I'm sharing a lot of the meat of it. And I think that's really important. I want people to get inspired, to latch onto it and to put it into practice in their own lives. That's what's important to me. So I've tried to make that available across the board. And it's, you can go to doadaybook.com and start at all of it from there.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'll link all of that up in the show notes for this episode. And again, Brian, it's been awesome talking with you. Glad we got the chance to do it. And hopefully we'll talk again soon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really enjoyed it.
So I hope that you walk away from this conversation with an understanding of what Brian is talking about when he talks about the difference between doing a day versus the idea of taking it one day at a time. And I know they sound like the same thing, but for me, it really helped to understand the difference between those two. And again, make sure to go check out his stuff. Go to doadaybook.com to find out more and to get the book. Thanks again for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this, please share it with someone specific that you know would enjoy it. And with that, I'll see you next episode.